Before listening to this video, I'll have to direct you to the first of two links in the description box, which is a summary of the case of Garnett versus the state of Maryland, which took place in 1993. Now, it's a bit lengthy, so I'm going to summarize the case even further. The facts are as follows. Raymond Leonard Grant, at the time of the case, was a man of 20 years old who suffered from mental retardation and had an IQ of 52. Raymond met Erica Frazier, who was 13 years old, through a friend, and the two subsequently talked on the telephone. And in December of 1990, Raymond was looking for a ride home and was looking to ask permission to use the phone at Frazier's house to call one. As Frazier saw Raymond approach the house, she invited Raymond up to her room, telling him to utilize a ladder to gain access to her window. He did so, and they ended up having sex, resulting in the pregnancy of Frazier, of which Raymond is the biological father. During the case, Raymond's defense tried repeatedly to offer up evidence that both Frazier and friends of Frazier assured Raymond that she was 16 years old instead of 13, and that Raymond had no reason to suspect otherwise. This evidence, however, was not allowed, and the reason why is what's important. You see, Raymond's offense was considered a strict liability offense, meaning that the fact that Frazier was 13 at the time, and that vaginal intercourse occurred, and that Raymond was at least 4 years older than Frazier was enough to convict him of statutory rape, even if consent was given, even if Raymond was led to believe that she was of age, hence the term strict liability offense. Meaning basically that you can be led into a crime genuinely not knowing it was a crime and still be culpable for that crime. Now, when dealing with age of consent law, we have to first understand that it is a law that by its very nature will imprison some that are innocent and pardon others that are guilty. How so? Well, the age of 18 in theory functions as an official line in the sand which when crossed confers adulthood. In practice, however, it's a meaningless and arbitrary distinction since it's entirely possible to have the reasoning capabilities of an adult at a younger age, and equally possible to come across those that have passed the threshold that have yet to display the coherence and maturity to understand the concept of things like consensual sex. Sexual buyer's remorse, the phenomenon that we observe when women, regretting voluntary acts of promiscuity that unfolded the night prior, retroactively withdraw their consent in the form of a false rape accusation, shows us that not all women past the age of 18 are capable of handling the responsibility that comes with the right to consent. Nevertheless, we have this number, and it's perfectly okay for a society to decide on an age of consent and stick to it, and I absolutely do not condone any illegal sexual activities with a minor whatsoever, but in the case of Garnett versus the state, we see that there is in fact room for abuse, and this abuse almost exclusively is aimed at men. The question that needs to be asked is simple. Should there be protection from malicious concealment of age used as a means to an end by a minor against an adult? Now, in cases of minors committing murders, it isn't unheard of for the minor to be charged as an adult. When we see premeditation and malicious intent, we decide that this person, this minor, is for the purposes of conviction a full-fledged adult. What are we saying as a society by doing this? We're saying that although this minor isn't an adult in the legal sense, he or she did in fact act as an adult, committed adult caliber crimes, and did so to a degree that we can no longer realistically look at them as a mere minor. Thus, we, despite our prerequisite of having lived 18 years on this planet, have decided that some particularly egregious actions can expedite adulthood, meaning that we can indeed see a correlation regardless of age, of adulthood and adult crime, even when those crimes are done by a minor. Common sense will tell you that if a minor uses a fake ID to drink at a bar and later on drives drunk, causing an accident resulting in the death of another human being, the bar should not be held responsible because the reasonable standard in place today for determining another person's age is a cursory glance at their ID. Not a foolproof electronic scan of some sort, but instead the assumption that an ID handed to a bartender, barring some glaring evidence of non-authenticity, is to be trusted. So then what should happen when a young but physically mature girl, let's say 16 years of age, knowingly uses fraudulent ID to conceal the fact that she was a minor for the purposes of having voluntary sex with an adult man of 20 years? All of a sudden that's a problem, and more accurately, the man's problem. We impose the legal concept of strict liability to blame the man for being fooled. We pretend that minors are incapable of using their minor status maliciously. Yet what happens when we're dealing with a case of a woman having consensual sex with an underage boy? What happens if a woman knowingly rapes a male minor resulting in a pregnancy? In this scenario, our justice system can and does order the underage boy to pay child support to his adult female rapist. And I've provided a link for anybody denying that this has in fact happened and is happening here in the West currently. And make no mistake about it, something like this can only happen in a society that hates men. And there's no sarcasm intended when I say hate. I mean that this society hates men, is indifferent to their suffering, and actively pursues misandry. Now, since there's a constant fog of male privilege clouding my understanding, I'm hoping that the feminists, in their infinite wisdom and thorough understanding of the inner workings of patriarchy, can enlighten me and provide me with some insight as to how a mentally retarded man can be charged as a statutory rapist for the same crime that a woman is now being rewarded with 18 years of financial assistance for, all courtesy of an underage male she victimized. The inquiry is, of course, rhetorical because, you see, slithering predatory snakes don't make it a habit of hissing about the dangers of venom. But here, we've amassed a stockpile of feminist anti-venom, one which is 100% effective and has no negative side effects. That being critical thought, the cure for feminist poison.